because of Trump, especially, Chicago has been reduced to this meaning this one thing.
Okay, today we're talking City So Real. So are you a Chicago native?
No,
Oh, okay.
I have to confess I'm not. I'm a Virginia native, but I've been here for 35 years.
Oh, okay. Well, what a expansive view you're giving us of Chicago. I've never been to Chicago. I don't know anything about Chicago, but this docuseries really captures a lot of what Chicago is. And it comes from
Thank you.
an objective camera. There's not a talking head. You're just kind of listening in on the community.
Yeah, I felt like it was important to be in the streets as completely as we could and follow both the mayoral campaign in that way, but also let the filming take us where it took us in terms of meeting everyday people in Chicago. It's a very serendipitous approach we took to telling the story. You know, a different crew could go out and go on a whole different track and do their own 5.5 hour portrait of Chicago that would be very different from this probably. But, you know, this one was our journey.
Yeah, you go into every borough, basically, into the community. So we see the Latino community, the African-American community. There's one in the first episode, we see the difference between a barbershop in an African-American community and another one. I don't know if they're Italian or mix of
there's a lot of Italian there and some Irish.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell. I can hear the accents, but
yeah,
it's very telling, the two contrasts, right? What they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what I was talking about just a moment ago with their serendipitousness of how we approached it. So we went to that black barbershop first, and that conversation was so compelling to us that it inspired us to want to go to find a white barbershop, because, you know, the black barbershop is considered a kind of iconic place where, you know, black men come together and talk about the issues of the day. Those guys were really talking. They were really talking. But we started thinking like, well, what about white barbershops? What do they talk about white barbershops? You know what I mean? What do those guys talk about? Well, they talk about donuts and but, you know, we didn't realize when we went to that barbershop that it was a lot of ex-cops.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you find that out in the series towards the end of that scene is the way we found out when we filmed it. It was like, oh, these are a bunch of ex-cops. And so that's the kind of discovery process that was what we did in this series.
Yeah, I mean, the barbershop scene with the ex-cops, it was very telling because the way they're making jokes about a cop shooting, and you're like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So vastly different communities and subjects. Is Chicago like Los Angeles, where it's very segregated according to groups?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, some have said that Chicago is the most segregated big city in America.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's true, but it could very well be true.
Mm-hmm.
There are large swaths of the city. You know, the north side is much more diverse. It's more prosperous. The south and west sides tend to be much less so, and more Black or Latinx, depending on where you are in the neighborhoods. So yes, and I think that's certainly something we show in the series is that there is this kind of segregation, and people, when people live in their own bubbles of their own neighborhoods, you know, they don't, I mean, you know, I want people who don't live in Chicago to learn a lot about Chicago. I actually want people who live in Chicago to learn a lot about Chicago from this series.
Yes, and like you mentioned the mayoral race. What a rat race! I mean, you call it the episode is called Bloodsport, and basically it is that. I mean, it is ruthless out there.
Yeah, Chicago has a reputation for its rough and tumble politics. There's a feeling here that if you can make it in politics here, you can make it anywhere. Wow. And certainly Obama cut his teeth here. Mm-hmm. He wasn't born here, but this is where he cut his teeth as a politician. And so, one of the things we show quite prominently in the series is the petition challenge process, which was utterly fascinating to us.
Yeah.
It's way more Byzantine and ruthless than I thought it would be. But there you go. I think it is kind of a stand-in for the whole political process here in Chicago.
Is that unique to Chicago, or do other cities do that?
No, other cities, you can challenge petitions in a lot of cities, but it's not nearly the sport and the strategic thing it is here. In Chicago, it's a blood sport. Obama won a race for Congress, state Congress, years ago, by basically getting his primary opponent thrown off during the petition process.
Oh, wow.
So, he learned.
And then you went back for the whole COVID situation, right? Like, I didn't know of Lori Lightfoot until this whole COVID came out, and I was looking across the country going, oh, wow, there are a lot of people of color in mayor, in office. So it was great to see that, but also to know more about Lori Lightfoot. So you went back and shot this new environment, right?
Yes, yeah, and it was great to be able to do that because at the end of episode 4, which was the original ending for the series, she's just becoming mayor, and it's pretty inspiring because she's someone who no one figured would become mayor, and she did, and she's this, first time office holder, Black lesbian. It was like, wow, look what can happen. She's had it's been tough being mayor here. It's always tough being mayor in Chicago, and so by flashing forward a year and picking up with the pandemic and then into the George Floyd upheaval, which is what we do in episode 5, we're able to give you a much fuller sense of what it means to actually govern in Chicago and the challenges. And this is a tough place. I mean, it's a tough place to govern anywhere right now.
Yeah.
But Chicago is historically, a passionate political town.
And I'm sure you do. I only caught 2 episodes, but I'm sure you cover the whole violence, the gun violence, in one of your episodes. Because Trump, it's always in Trump's. He's always bashing Chicago for that.
Gun violence comes up in multiple ways. One of the things, though, I steered clear of was I did a film about 10 years ago on the violence in Chicago called The Interrupters. And so the violence is omnipresent, and it is in the series. But I did not want to spend a lot of time focused on it in this series. And the reason I didn't was because it is the poster child of Chicago. It is the way in which, because of Trump especially, Chicago has been reduced to this meaning this one thing. And I felt like it was really important for people, particularly who aren't from Chicago, to see that there's so much more to Chicago, which is not to say that it's all rainbows and bunnies.
Yeah.
It's not. But there are other things that drive the city and that are bedeviling the city and impacting the city than the urban violence.